It's January 21st. It's the day that we get to review Joe Biden's first day in office. The inauguration appears to have gone off without any problems. So, notably, we get to look at some of the executive orders that he signed on his first day. We will be referencing this Kiro 7 when looking at a bunch of the executive orders being in place. So, first executive order requires that people wear masks and maintain social distancing on federal property, and launches the 100-day masking challenge to encourage Americans to wear masks. It's not exactly a secret that I'm not really a big fan of Biden. I also am not a big fan of Trump, for anyone that's actually watched me. However, I think Pence got something exactly right in his debate with Kamala Harris. This looks awfully like plagiarism. The Trump administration did have the 15 and the 30 days to slow the spread early on back in last March, which was headed by Mike Pence. And ultimately, it didn't end up doing very much for preventing the pandemic. It did slow the spread, but that's really all it did, was slow the spread. I live in a pretty left-wing city. You know, everyone here wears masks, especially when they're out walking their dogs alone. But the area I'm in has some of the worst COVID numbers in the country. And the obvious medical reason for that is because people interact more when they live in cities and close together. There's a natural border to people that live in rural environments, and there's less interaction with people outside the bubble. I think the biggest thing to learn off of this is how unprepared we are for a country for events like this. And I don't expect this 100 days to do very much for slowing the pandemic. I think Biden's very lucky that the vaccine is currently out and being spread. And that is what's going to naturally stop the pandemic. Next. We have the reversal of Trump's decision to remove the U.S. from the WHO, World Health Organization. Anthony Fauci, the nation's top infectious disease expert, will lead the American delegation. And in my opinion, this is mostly symbolic. In my opinion, the best thing we could use in this is being able to pressure China. The United States doesn't really do anything with the World Health Organization other than pay their bill. But China is really the member that has the largest influence on the powers that be in the organization. And hopefully we can use our influence to put some pressure on China regarding some of their human rights abuses done with the Uyghurs and in Hong Kong. So there is opportunity there, but I have a hard time believing this administration will live up to those standards. Next, there is an instrument that will allow the U.S. to rejoin the Paris Agreement on climate change within 30 days. The executive order fulfilled a campaign promise and represented a stark rebuke to Trump's America First approach. The Post reported Trump officially withdrew from the nation from the Paris Agreement on November 4th. This is also just a very symbolic change. Even being outside of the Paris Agreement, the United States has been on track to meet their 2030 goals, unlike China, India, and notably France, who, has the namesake of the agreement. However, this does give the opportunity, again, for the United States to push their influence on other countries. However, I am skeptical that Biden will do any type of political pressure on foreign countries, and really am only expecting the traditional military approach. Next, we have an executive order with the aim of embedding equity across federal policy making and rooting out systemic racism and other barriers to opportunity from federal programs and institutions. This order will also disband the Trump administration's 7076 Commission, which released a report on Monday that historians said distorted the role of slavery in the U.S. This is probably one of the most noteworthy positions, and it really just shows what his approach is going to be to unity with Trump supporters. I know Ben Shapiro is a pretty popular commentator on the right, and his view on racism is, if you give him a person, policy, or action that is racist, he will stand with you, but just crying systemic racism is not something that you can actually fight. If the position that the Biden administration takes is something similar to that if there is a policy or action or person that is found to be racist, then that is stopped, then I'll be perfectly fine with it. However, I think the general approach that's taken on these types of issues is just in the wrong direction. The 1776 Commission represented Trump supporters that they were being listened to and that their culture was not forgotten. I'm scared that this will be a continued cultural track that says that non-European culture is propped up at the expense of whites. This is not multiculturalism, it's racist. Next, I'm going to lump two executive orders together. One is an executive order reversing an order that excluded undocumented immigrants from the census. The order now requires non-citizens to be included in the census, and the appointment of congressional representatives. And then secondly, a direction to preserve and fortify the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program. The memo strengthens DACA after Trump's efforts to undo protection for undocumented people who were brought into the country as children. I think these are actually perfectly fine. Besides the census portion, I think it's a really, like, once again, hitting at the previous point, like, it's really a slap in the face to Trump supporters to say that their representation is the same as someone who's undocumented and not a citizen of the United States. I don't know what that will do for unity for the country. However, I do think that there's a reasonable thing to look at with this 8-year citizenship path. I think this is something that Republicans should jump on, and will be found to be hopefully a decent, moderate approach. Looking at the plan, it is 5 years on a green card, and then 3 years to get actual citizenship, and it does require paying taxes during that entire time, which in my opinion is the biggest thing that Republicans hold against undocumented immigrants is, you know, whether they're paying into the tax system. So I think another purpose of it being 8 years rather than 4 is it will become a 2024 election issue, and I hope that Republicans actually just jump on board on this. I think this is a good step. As long as we have some type of mechanisms in place that make it so not everyone can just jump the border whenever they willy-nilly want to, this should be fine. Finally, there is a executive action repealing two proclamations informally known as the Muslim ban that restricted entry into the United States from majority Muslim countries. Biden directed the State Department to restart visa processing for individuals from the affected country. The New York Times reported the president also asked the agency to develop ways to address the harm caused to those who are prevented from coming to the United States because of the ban. My only comments on the ban is that it wasn't actually a Muslim ban. Half the countries involved weren't even like Muslim countries, and ironically the list of countries came from the Obama administration, which, you know, obviously had Biden as an influence. It's something that just wasn't really documented at all, and really just shows the blatant hypocrisy going on. I think it's also important to remember what the context of the Muslim ban was when it was initially instated, which, you know, the quote-unquote Muslim ban, which was during the Syria refugee crisis that happened early on in Trump's administration, and I think it was end of Obama, early Trump administration, and there just wasn't a clear way for how to do the research on individuals that could potentially come into the country. This was also when ISIS was still a problem, which we haven't heard any problems of lately. So this is a review of Joe Biden's first day in office. A lot of executive orders. That's kind of the tendency that every president has. We'll keep eyes out for, we're still counting down the days for him to become a war criminal like all of his predecessors. But with that, have a good one.